A bourbon distillery in Kentucky empties whiskey from a barrel after several years of aging. The oak cask still looks solid. No cracks, no decay. Yet under U.S. law, it cannot be used again for the next batch of bourbon, not because it is damaged, but because regulations require bourbon to be aged in completely new oak barrels that have been charred on the inside. This rule is not a minor detail. It is part of the legal definition of bourbon under U.S. federal standards since the 20th century. The spirit must be made from at least 51% corn, distilled below 80% ABV, and aged in new charred oak containers. New means the barrel must never have held any other spirit before. A standard American oak barrel holds about 200 liters. When the inside is charred, fire breaks down lignin and hemicellulose in the wood, producing vanillin, caramel notes, and smoky compounds. The thin charcoal layer acts like a filter, absorbing certain impurities while reacting with the whiskey over time. After several years, much of the easily extractable flavor has already been drawn out. If the same barrel were reused for bourbon, the next batch would receive far less wood character. The new barrel requirement ensures that every production cycle starts with a fresh supply of oak compounds. Yet the rule does more than shape flavor. It quietly influences an entire global supply chain. Once bourbon is removed, the barrel loses value within the bourbon industry. It becomes a used cask in their system. At that moment, the story moves far beyond Kentucky. When barrels are charred at level 3 or 4, meaning the interior is burned for roughly 35 to 55 seconds, the inner surface reaches temperatures high enough to form a charcoal layer several millimeters thick. That layer is porous, increasing the contact area between whiskey and wood. More surface area means more reactions occurring across every square centimeter. During the first year of aging, whiskey moves in and out of the wood as warehouse temperatures change. Kentucky summers can exceed 30 degrees Celsius, expanding the wood and pushing liquid deep into its grain. Colder winters pull the spirit back out. Each seasonal shift acts like a slow press and release cycle. After hundreds of these cycles across several years, most soluble compounds have been extracted. Reusing the same barrel for fresh bourbon would significantly reduce vanillin and caramel production, potentially altering the expected style. The law requiring new barrels creates a stable standard, minimizing variation caused by reuse. Stability matters to a large industry, producing millions of barrels every year. Those numbers are not abstract. The United States produces millions of bourbon barrels annually. Each one remains physically intact after its first use. American white oak is durable and naturally resistant to leaks because of its tight cellular structure. That immediately raises an economic question. What happens to all these barrels? Scotland does not require new barrels for Scotch. Their regulations allow aging in previously used oak casks. As long as the container has not held prohibited substances, this flexibility opened a door. As the bourbon industry expanded in the 20th century, the supply of used barrels grew rapidly. A new oak cask can cost several hundred U.S. dollars, while used bourbon barrels are significantly cheaper. For Scotch producers, they became an ideal resource. Casks already infused with vanillin and caramel notes, yet not completely exhausted. When Scotch is aged in ex-bourbon barrels, it does not receive the intense burst of oak character found in first-year bourbon. Instead, the interaction is gentler, allowing malted barley flavors and peat smoke, if present, to remain at the forefront. After 10, sure, or even 18 years, the balance between spirit and wood evolves into the layered complexity many drinkers appreciate. The economic cycle behind this system is remarkable. U.S. law created a one-way flow of barrels from Kentucky to Scotland, Ireland, Japan, and the Caribbean. Rum and tequila industries also participate in this circulation. A domestic regulation unintentionally built an aging infrastructure for distilleries across the globe. Without the new barrel requirement, The market for used casks might never have reached such scale. When you hold a bottle of scotch labeled aged in ex-bourbon casks, you are seeing the influence of American law printed between the lines. Why did the United States adopt this rule in the first place? Part of the answer lies in standardization and reputation. After Prohibition in the early 20th century, the American whiskey industry needed to rebuild trust. Strict definitions helped distinguish authentic bourbon from lower-quality blends. The new barrel requirement also supported the American oak industry. White oak forests became a strategic resource. An oak tree typically needs 70 to 100 years to grow large enough for barrel production. Every cask carries a life cycle longer than a human career. Once bourbon leaves a barrel, the cask can still be reused 2 or 3 more times for other spirits. Each subsequent fill extracts fewer compounds, creating tiers in the market: first fill, second fill, and third fill casks. Prices and flavor expectations shift with each stage. In your glass, the difference between a Scotch matured in a first fill ex-bourbon barrel and one aged in a former sherry cask is not accidental. It reflects a combination of law, trade, oak biology, and long-term chemistry. A regulation that appears dry on paper has shaped a worldwide ecosystem of flavor. The next time you read "aged in new charred oak barrels" on a bourbon label, imagine the chain of events behind it: wood meeting fire, whiskey soaking into grain, barrels crossing oceans, and new spirits continuing the aging journey. If legal details can redraw the map of global taste, it raises a quiet question: how many other flavors around us were designed by rules most people never notice?